Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a really foundational question about psychology. Where do our feelings actually come from?
It seems obvious, right?
Totally. The intuitive answer for most of us is that a feeling starts in the mind. You feel joy or fear or sadness, and then your body reacts.
You see a bear, your brain processes danger, you feel dread, and then you start to run and shake.
Exactly. And that perspective, which has, dominated Western thought for centuries, is what's called the classic intellectualist theory.
Right. It basically says emotion is a mental operation. It's a product of ideas in your mind either agreeing or clashing with each other. It puts your thoughts in the driver's seat.
But the sources we've dug into for this deep dive, they present this completely radical inversion. They look at the physical roots of emotion and ask, what if that whole sequence is backward?
What if the body moves first?
Yes. The core idea we're exploring is that we don't feel sadness and then start crying. Instead, we are sad because we are crying, because our body has already kicked off that physical response.
And that's our mission today. We're going to unpack this really controversial thesis that pleasure and pain are just the superficial symptoms of something much, much deeper.
And more involuntary.
Absolutely. The argument is that the engine of all our feelings, even something like a moral conviction, is rooted in biological necessity and these physical motor manifestations.
Okay, so let's set up this conflict, this intellectual battlefield. On one side, you have that intellectualist theory we all kind of instinctively believe.
That emotion is purely mental. It's just the immediate awareness of, an elevated or a depressed state in your mind. It's all in the head.
But then our sources introduce this really challenging new thesis. They argue that pleasure and pain, the things we consciously feel, are just like the foam on top of the wave.
Exactly. The deep element is what they call tendencies, appetites, needs, and desires. And if you strip away all the conscious awareness, what you're left with is just this involuntary physical urge.
So these tendencies are basically the deep wiring pushing you toward or away from something.
Right. They're motor manifestations. Your nervous system is already primed for action long before your brain labels the feeling.
So if the feeling is just a symptom, we have to look for the roots somewhere else. Not in thought, but in basic biology.
We have to trace it all the way back to the very origin of physiological life itself. I mean, think about simple masses of protoplasm.
Like single-celled organisms. We're going that far back.
We have to. Even something like a slime mold exhibits these two really well-defined tendencies, attraction and repulsion.
So attraction is what? Moving toward food.
It's assimilation, nutrition. It's the basic urge to consume. And repulsion is already a defensive action, moving away from harm.
Wait, are we really saying a slime mold gets attracted to something?
Yeah.
That seems like a pretty strong claim for the foundation of, say, human love or desire.
Well, the instinct comes way before the concept. If you put these organisms in water and then you drop in a piece of sawdust, they will immediately start moving toward it. It's like they're seized by this physical homesickness for nutrients.
They don't have a brain to decide, I want that.
No, they just move. And that involuntary motor impulse, that movement, is the foundation of emotion.
And we can see this happening inside our own bodies too, right? Without us thinking about it at all.
Precisely. Take phagocytes, or white blood cells. They have what's called chemiotaxic sensibility.
Meaning they can smell or taste things on a chemical level.
They can distinguish between friend and foe microbes. They hunt down invaders. This is an instinctive defensive tendency hardwired into our immune system. It's a tiny life and death drama playing out constantly with zero conscious thought from you.
So the big takeaway here is that if you strip away all the conscious psychology, the thinking part, what's left?
The physiological tendency, the motor element, the impulse to move toward what preserves life and away from what harms it. That's the irreducible core of feeling.
Which brings us to probably the most radical application of this idea.
The James-Lange hypothesis. This theory, from William James and Carl Lange, takes this idea, the primacy of the body, and applies it to really complex human feelings. Fear, joy, anger.
And it was so radical because we're all used to thinking that emotion travels from the brain to the body. James and Lange just flipped that completely.
They did. They argued that the physiological shock, the heart racing, the breathing getting faster, muscles tensing up, that all precedes our conscious awareness of the emotion.
So it's like your body is a lie detector that's running just a little bit faster than your conscious brain.
That's a great way to put it. You see the bear, your body instantly floods with adrenaline, your heart pounds, you're already running, and only then does your brain get the feedback from your body and interpret all those signals as Fear.
So you're afraid because your body is already in panic mode.
Exactly. You are afraid because you are running.
Okay, so if emotion is really just a bodily change, a physiological outcome, we should be able to measure it, right?
Yeah.
We can measure pleasure and pain objectively.
We can. Our sources analyze them through measurable changes in our vital functions: circulation, respiration, movement. Objectively, pleasure is a sign of a heightening of those functions. It's a measurable augmentation of energy.
Your eyes get brighter, your posture improves, that kind of thing.
Right. And pain is the opposite. It's always correlated with a loss of energy, a drop in circulation, slower movements, nervous depression.
Feeling good means you're gaining energy. Feeling bad means you're losing it. Simple as that.
Well, almost. The source material introduces a more complex model here, which they call the difference hypothesis. It's not just about the amount of energy, but the rate of gain or loss.
Okay, what does that mean?
It suggests that pleasant and painful states come from a difference between two opposite processes happening at the same time: constructive activities like energy gain, and destructive ones like expenditure or injury.
Give me an example of that.
Sure. If your energy gain exactly equals your energy loss, say 50 units in, 50 units out, your state is neutral. You don't feel much of anything.
Indifferent.
Exactly. But if the gain suddenly accelerates or the loss decreases, say gain goes up to 70 and loss stays at 40, that positive difference of plus 30 is felt as a pleasant state. It's the rate of gain versus the rate of loss that you feel.
That makes perfect sense for things like physical healing. But what about the exceptions? I mean, what about cases where pleasure seems totally disconnected from something useful? Or worse, connected to something harmful?
You're talking about morbid pleasures.
Yeah, like the luxury of grief.
Yeah.
Why do we sometimes find pleasure in suffering? People talk about rejoicing in their tears. If pleasure is about vital gain, why would we enjoy feeling heartbroken?
It's a fantastic question, and it seems like a huge contradiction.
It sounds like a massive flaw in the theory. Is enjoying a good cry just a clerical error in my body's accounting system?
The proposed explanation, and it is just a proposal, connects it back to that core principle of increased activity. They argue that the main reason is the increased activity that's sent through our whole being by the sense of our own suffering.
So grief forces this huge internal expenditure of nervous energy.
A tremendous amount. That profound activity, that sense of your whole being rushing to process a major event, generates its own kind of positive feeling of engagement and intensity. The body is rewarding the activity of processing, not the suffering itself.
So the body rewards energy expenditure, even if the cause is destructive. That's a pretty bleak way to look at it.
It gets even more dramatic when you look at what are called destructive pleasures. Think of the euphoria of the dying, which is sometimes seen in patients with terminal illnesses. They can be rich with hopes and plans for the future, right up to the end.
So the objective reality is total physical decay, but the subjective feeling is intense joy. How does that fit the model?
It suggests the body's regulatory system has broken down. The illness itself might be causing an unchecked, wild burst of activity in certain systems, which produces this deceptive, powerful sense of vigor that the mind just translates as happiness.
The body's energy engine is going completely off the rails.
And the internal signal is positive, even though there's a catastrophic failure happening just beneath the surface.
Wow. The signal is a lie, but the feeling is real. Okay, so let's move from these simple motor reactions to how this physical engine could possibly account for more complex, abstract human feelings.
We know the primitive stuff, fear, anger, affection, is shared with animals. They are just baked into the organism.
But what about aesthetics? How does my physical body dictate what I feel when I listen to a symphony? That seems purely intellectual.
It's actually the perfect test case for the theory because music acts directly on the organism. It affects animals, primitive man, civilized man. It works on us like a burn or a caress. It's a physical stimulus.
And how do we know it hits the body first?
Because your pulse is incredibly sensitive to rhythm, studies show your heart rate speeds up or slows down based on the beat you're hearing. It affects your circulation, your breathing, your muscle tension. It creates a physical disposition in your body.
A vague state of excitement or calm.
Exactly. And only then does your intellect get the memo and decide, the sudden calm physical state must be serenity, or this rapid anxious physical state must be sadness.
So the intellect is just embroidering its designs onto this purely organic canvas.
Precisely. The body provides the raw feeling. The mind provides the label.
So let's take this into the social and moral world. If our whole emotional life starts as just an instinct for survival, how does that become something as abstract as caring about my social status?
Well, it starts with what they call the self-feeling, the innate motor response to feeling strong or weak. That basic instinct of conservation then just gets transferred to the social environment.
Society becomes another condition of existence, like food or shelter.
Exactly. So when you have a loss or gain in social status, it produces emotion because it's a signal.
Hmm.
It tells you whether your adaptation to those social conditions has gotten better or worse.
So a threat to my rank is treated by my body, just like a threat to my physical survival.
That's the theory. Think of the famous memoirist, the Duke of Saint-Simon, at the court of Louis XIV. He would boil over with indignation, suffer real physical distress over the tiniest things about rank and precedence.
Like who sat on which stool, or who got to enter a room first. To us, that sounds so trivial.
Utterly trivial. But for him, that slight wasn't an abstract insult. It was a visceral, physical threat to his status. And in that world, status meant power, resources, safety.
So his organism registered that social slight with the same gravity as a physical injury.
Yes, his indignation wasn't about the idea of rank. It was his body reacting with the motor impulse of defensive rage against a perceived loss of his vital conditions for living.
Which brings us back to the core thesis. An idea that is only an idea, a piece of knowledge, produces nothing. It's inert.
It only acts if it's felt, if it's accompanied by an affective state that wakes up those fundamental motor elements. You can know something is morally wrong, but you won't act until you feel a sense of injustice.
Without the physical engine, the intellect is just a library.
Exactly. The affective part is the action part.
So as we start to synthesize all this, let's look at how this affective foundation shapes our personality and how we break down. Our sources classify character based on this emotional and energetic disposition.
Yes, they suggest real character is about unity and stability. And they basically categorize people into three types based on their internal energy supply.
Sure.
You have the sensitive, who have an extreme susceptibility and often lean toward pessimism. Then the active, who have this abundant supply of energy and just need an outlet for it. And finally, the apathetic, who have a general lowering of the powers of both feeling and acting.
Your character is fundamentally about how your energetic engine is wired.
That's the idea. And what's really telling is what happens when that engine starts to fail in old age or disease. The law of decay they describe perfectly confirms the primacy of this physiological root.
The decay pattern is logical, but kind of heartbreaking.
It is. The highest, most complex, and newest feelings disappear first. The order of dissolution goes from the top down. The superfluous feelings, aesthetic appreciation, complex intellectual sentiment, broad empathy, they're the first to go.
So the ability to appreciate a complex piece of art vanishes long before the ability to feel hungry or afraid does.
Precisely. The very last feelings to disappear are the strictly egoistic ones. They are the bedrock. Anger, the offensive instinct, fear, the defensive instinct, and the basic nutritive cravings, hunger and thirst.
They're the last to go.
They persist in humans and animals right up to the farthest limits of life. They are the most stubborn biological facts we have.
So when we put this all together, what does this deep dive really tell us? We've seen that emotions like fear and joy seem to be less about mental interpretation and more about the body's instant, involuntary physical response.
It's a profound, non-intellectual language. The tendency to act, that motor element, is the first fact of psychological life. Consciousness and understanding, they come later.
The final synthesis, then, is that the effective life is primary. It's older, deeper, and more fundamental than our intelligence.
Right. So if our tendency to action, this inherited involuntary motor impulse, is the irreducible element of all emotion, consider this. How much of what you believe to be a rational thought or a moral conviction is actually just the intellectual expression of a deep pre-existing motor impulse you inherited from ages and ages past?
What feeling are you confusing with a fixed idea right now? That's definitely something to think about. Thank you for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.